are going to demonstrate all of these things when we started checking into the past question. That is, in our subsequent videos, we will bring a passage. I'll bring a passage for us and we'll read together. It will be displayed on the screen. Then we answer questions on word substitution basically and figure of speech. And also we demonstrate where to answer questions in sentences, furthermore on what we've done earlier. So that is that for comprehension. That is that for comprehension. So next on the big five outlines, next on the big five outline is the grammar aspect of English, the structural aspect of English. Number 2, we have it in grammar / structure. You see, basically when we talk about grammar, I do tell students that grammar is the foundation of English. Your knowledge of grammar is as important as the life in a living thing. That is, you need to have an in-depth knowledge of grammar before you can be a good English student, before you can be able to write English exam and be able to pass correctly, because your knowledge of grammar is needed in most areas of English. Your knowledge of grammar is needed. So we are going to internalize everything that is needed to be studied under grammar. You know, basically when we talk about grammar has to do with the way words are being patterned, the way words are being structured, which is why we refer it to as structure. The word sentences should be structured correctly without committing any errors or blunders. So the areas that is first important in grammar is word class. Yes, word class. That's what we call the part of speech. The part of speech. You see, a lot of students joke with word class, but I tell you that word class is very important. You cannot do without word class in English. Why? Word class, as we all know, to be the part of speech. As the name implies, part of speech, that is, every speech we make, every sentences we write, there are parts in it. It can be broken down into words, which is why we call it word class. That is, every words of English, they are classified into the word class, into the part of speech, into the parts they belong in speech. And don't forget, we all know that basically we have 8 parts of speech. So I do tell students that the part of speech, they are what categorize every words you make in English. That is, every word in English belongs to a particular part of speech, except the articles that doesn't belong. Every word in English, they function into a particular part of speech. For instance, look at this sentence. Tolu is smart. Look at this sentence. Now what we have here is the incorporation of 3 words before we can have this sentence. Tolu is a word, is a word, smart is also a word. Which is why what I'm now saying is that each of these words, they can be categorized into the word class. For instance, Tolu is a noun. Tolu is a noun. Is a verb. Then smart is a what? Is an adjective. Is an adjective. Smart is an adjective. So this is what I'm saying. That is, you should be able to categorize every word in English into the word class that belongs. That is English for you. That is the function of grammar. You need to be able to do that. Which is why we help you to having the knowledge, a total knowledge of English. So other aspects we are going to check. So in our subsequent video, all the word class will be discussed, their rules, and how we can make sentences correctly using the word class without flouting the rules of grammar or the rules of English. So after after we might have studied the word class, then another aspect to be studied is phrase, clause, and sentence. Yes, Because in the hierarchy of grammar, after we have a word, basically as a kid in the school, what you will be exposed to in studying grammar, or let me say English generally, is the alphabet of English. So you have the letter first, you learn the letter first, then the words of English, followed by making the word to be a phrase or clause. Then after a while, you can now make sentences. Then your sentences can graduate to what we call paragraph. Then your paragraph can graduate to what we call discourse. Then through that you can have pages of your work. So this is the hierarchy in grammar: letter to word to phrase or clause, then sentence, paragraph, and discourse. Meanwhile, all of these things, we don't really need most of them for WAEC or for any exams. What we just need to study is the phrase, clause, and sentence. So number 3, so in our subsequent videos, all of these things will be internalized. We'll pick all of these items separately. Number three things to look onto is what we call rules of concord. Although lately I discovered with series of past questions that I've looked into, especially for JAMB, questions are not much on rules of concord. Like in the days, you are answering as a JAMB candidate, you are answering the question for English. Don't forget. Though I'll still make a video on this exam body separately. You understand? That is the areas you need to capture for each exam bodies and the question you should be expecting. So for JAMB candidate, don't forget you're answering 60 questions for English, and lately question has not been coming too well from the rules of concord, unlike the days when we have 100 questions for English in JAMB. So although nevertheless we are still going into check onto the rules of concord, and we check on some of the rules that we might likely come across in exams. Then the next area we need to study is what we call question tags. So you need to study question tags, that is how to respond to questions in tags. So we are going to study that also. So these areas, they are the most peculiar area in grammar that you need to study hard on before you can be able to answer questions on grammar. So we've done for comprehension, we've done for grammar and structure. So the other aspects that we need to look into for every English exams, don't forget, is the area of lexemes / vocabulary. Don't forget, lexemes has to do with words, meaning of a words in isolation and in sentence, which is why we refer to it as vocabulary. That is, exam body wants to test your knowledge of knowing the meaning of a word. Your knowledge that is, are you a bank of vocabulary? You see, as a student, there's no way you can be able to know the meaning of every word in the dictionary. But meanwhile, you have to some extent be able to know the meaning of words before you can write exams in English. And the areas to be studied when we get to these aspects, number 1 is your synonyms and antonyms. Don't forget, synonyms has to do with similar in meaning, while antonyms has to do with opposites in meaning. So exams don't joke with these areas of English. They don't. I can even say in the objective questions of JAMB, this area covers about 15 questions out of the 60 questions for the JAMB. You can see that your knowledge of synonyms and antonyms is very important. That is, an instruction will be given for you to provide a word that is closely nearer in meaning to a particular word that is being underlined in the series of sentences you have in that section, and as well as words that are closely opposite, that are nearly opposite
in those words also. So in this aspect, each of it has its own segment in which you cannot answer question. I mean, you cannot answer less than 5 questions in each of these aspects in the exam. Then another aspect under the vocabulary is your phrasal verb. Yes, you don't joke with phrasal verb when you talk about vocabulary, because phrasal verb has to also deal with meaning. It has to do with meaning, that is, when a verb and a particle is combined together as a word, they give special meaning, and that meaning is what you will be asked. For instance, take after. Take after. There is a verb. Take is a verb. After is an adverb. That's a particle that is being joined with the verb. So all of what we are majorly focusing here is that phrasal verbs, they do have a special and a denotative meaning, in which they have a special meaning, a deep and in-depth meaning to what compared to the two words that form them. For instance, take after now. The meaning is to resemble. 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 Two words that form the phrasal verb, which is why our knowledge of phrasal verb is very important too. So we'll look at various examples when we get to the area under the phrasal verbs. So another aspect to look into in the lexis and structure is number 3, your register or collocation. That is, especially, which is why we refer it to as lexis. Sometimes you will be tested on register, that is, words that are in the same environment, words that we use in the same context, in the same situation, in the same environment, especially when we talk about professions and careers. In the fourth area to look onto under the vocabulary is also what we call idiomatic expressions. Idiomatic, that is idioms. Idiomatic expressions, especially for interpretation. Yes, which is why I do slash it with interpretation. I remember those days, JAMB doesn't even have it an idiomatic expression. They have it an interpretation, that is, sentences will be given using idiomatic expression or idioms, in which you are meant to know the meaning, to answer, and to be able to give the meaning of those words in the sentence. So the next thing we are going to check in the big 5 outlines is peculiar for the JAMB, the WAEC NECO candidates, which is because JAMB candidates, you are not having a writing text exam rather than having an objective test exam. So for WAEC candidates and NECO, you are writing. You are to be tested on writing. And that is the fourth one, writing English. Writing English. You see, this aspect of English is very, very important, especially for WAEC. There is no way you can do well in the writing English in WAEC that you will not be able to have your good grade for your result. There's no way. So the writing, as it implies, that is, you want to be tested your writing skills. Your writing skills in English. Don't forget the 4 basic skills in English. We're not going to mention that for this video. But for writing, the aspects you'll be tested, number 1 is your letter writing. Letter writing. Number 2, the essay writing. Then 3, speech writing. That is, you want to be tested how you can write a speech. Then lastly, let me see, the has to do with creative writing, article writing for publication, as the instruction may be given. So this has to do with your creativity, your creative writing. So in our subsequent video, when we get to this level, we'll be internalizing, we'll be dismantling the area, the way, how can you write a letter correctly and be able to have all your mark under the writing English in the exam. But there is this thing that I do understand. Don't forget, for what a candidate, this aspect of English in the section that it will be structured, you'll be given questions in each of the items. For letter writing, you have a question or two. For essay writing, you have a question or two. For speech writing, you have a question, and you are meant to answer one. You pick one. But I do advise students to answer questions on letter writing. I have my reasons. When we get there, I will show us why. I do advise students to answer questions on letter writing. Although it depends on your skills and your level of intelligence on writing. So the areas of writing English are these. The areas that we are supposed to learn and be able to do well are these 4 items for the writing English. And lastly, in the Big 5 outline, is the area of oral English. Oral English. I have my reason why I am smiling for this aspect of English. You see, a lot of students have difficulty in answering questions on English. Yes, a lot. I've taught in various coaching center for level, and I've discovered that many students are not interested in the oral English as well of English. And meanwhile, if you are a WAEC candidate on NECO, you need to get yourself interested in this aspect of English. Why? Because you have a separate segment of questions to be answered under this aspect of English, which is about 60 questions. You can see, imagine that. If you do not do well in the oral English, I bet you, your grades might not be encouraging after the end of the exam. So the areas we should look onto now, basically when we talk about oral English, we have to do with speaking, oral, that is everything that comes out from your mind, from your mouth, that is the sound you make. So oral has to do with speaking. Oral, it has to do with speaking. And the area we need to look onto, and the reason why we call it oral English, because we are studying the sound of English, not the sound of Yoruba or the sound of Spanish or French language. We are studying the sounds of English because every language of the world has sound. Yes, there is no way you want to speak a language without you making a sound. So most language have sound, although a lot of language don't have the writing form of their language, but nevertheless, a language must always have a sound. Yes, you must make sound before you can speak. That is why we basically target oral English, because we want to study the sound of English. And number one thing to look into here is the English sounds. The English sounds, which is 1, the vowel sounds, then 2, the consonant sounds. Consonant sounds. When we get to this level in our subsequent video, I will first make us to understand the difference between sound and letter. Sound is different from letter. Although we have letters in words, but the letters in every words is not always the same as the sound. So we are going to discuss that when we get to the area here in our subsequent video. Then number 2 is aspect of oral English is your stress pattern. Yes, stress pattern. Yes, candidates will be tested on stress. That is, what syllable is expected to have a force in a particular word, especially a word that have more than 2 syllables. That is, what is the particular syllable to receive the force, the energy for the word in pronouncing that particular word, So when we study stress, we are going to study syllables, and when we discuss on all of the syllables that is supposed to be stressed in a particular word. Then the next thing I'm getting exhausted already. The next thing to discuss under the oral English is the emphatic stress. This still based on stress. Too. But in an emphatic stress, we are actually looking at the stress in the word to be stressed in a particular sentence. That is what words supposed to receive the emphasis in a particular sentence. And lastly on it, we are going to look at rhyme pattern. That has to do with homophone. That is words with the same sounds, words that have the same rhyme or rhyming scale in their pronunciation. So all of these things are what we are going to be taking one after the other in our subsequent video, and we are going to internalize them and dismantle them, and we are going to check onto past questions in each of these segments of English. Do well to follow the YouTube channel and other social media platform that is displayed on this video. Thank you. See you next time.